Laura Bennett lived in a small, quiet town surrounded by cornfields and endless skies. It wasn't the kind of place where exciting things happened often. People knew each other, waved hello on the street, and went about their lives without much fuss. Laura was no different. She taught 5th grade at the local elementary school, spent weekends baking cookies with her kids, and tried to make every day count. Her life revolved around 2 people: her daughter Emma, who was 12, and her son Jake, who was 8. They were everything to her. Emma loved books and dreamed of becoming an astronaut one day. She would sit by the window for hours, staring up at the stars, imagining what it might be like to explore distant planets. Jake, on the other hand, was all energy and curiosity. He adored dinosaurs, robots, and anything that moved fast. Together, they filled Laura's world with laughter and noise, turning even the most ordinary moments into something special. But that changed on a night when the sky seemed brighter than usual. It started with a strange feeling, a sense that something wasn't quite right. Laura couldn't put her finger on it, but as she tucked Emma and Jake into bed, she noticed how unusually still the air felt. There was no breeze, no chirping crickets, not even the faint hum of electricity from the power lines nearby. The silence pressed down on her like a weight. Still, she shook off the unease, kissed her children goodnight, and headed downstairs to finish grading papers. About an hour later, Laura heard it, a low, droning sound coming from outside. At first, she thought it might be a car engine or maybe a plane flying too low. But when she looked out the living room window, she saw nothing, just the dark outline of trees against the starlit sky. Then the lights appeared. At first, they were dim, like fireflies hovering high above the house. But soon they grew brighter, pulsing in colors Laura had never seen before. Shades of green, purple, and gold that danced across the heavens. Her heart began to race. She grabbed a flashlight and stepped onto the porch, calling out into the darkness. "Hello? Is anyone out there?" No one answered. Instead, the lights descended lower, moving closer until they formed a massive shape overhead. It was a ship, sleek and metallic, unlike anything Laura had ever imagined. Its surface shimmered as if alive, reflecting the light of the stars. For a moment, she stood frozen, unable to believe what she was seeing. Then, panic set in. She ran, back inside, screaming for Emma and Jake. When she burst into their room, she found them sitting up in bed, wide-eyed and scared. "Mom, what's happening?" Emma asked, clutching her blanket tightly. Jake clung to his sister, tears streaming down his face. Before Laura could respond, the door flew open. Shadows spilled into the room, tall and featureless, blocking out the soft glow of the nightlight. They moved quickly, surrounding the bed. One of them reached for Emma while another grabbed Jake. Both children screamed, struggling against their captors, but it was useless. The creatures were too strong. Laura lunged forward, trying to pull them away, but something struck her hard in the chest. She fell backward, gasping for breath as the world spun around her. Through blurred vision, she watched helplessly as the shadows dragged her children toward the glowing ship. "No!" she shouted, forcing herself to stand. "Leave them alone." But her words fell on deaf ears. The last thing Laura saw before passing out was the ship lifting off, its brilliant lights fading into the night sky. Then everything went black. When she woke up, the house was eerily silent. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking the passage of time she couldn't account for. Laura stumbled to her feet, her body aching as if she'd been hit by a truck. Her mind raced with questions. Had it been real? Could aliens actually exist? Or had she simply imagined the whole thing? The answer came when she entered Emma and Jake's room. Their beds were empty, the sheets tossed aside as though they'd been taken in a hurry. Toys lay scattered on the floor, and Jake's favorite, dinosaur figurine, sat abandoned on the bedside table. A cold dread settled over Laura. This wasn't some nightmare. It was real. Someone, or something, had taken her children. Over the next few days, Laura did everything she could think of to find them. She called the police, but they dismissed her story as hysteria. No one believed her when she described the ship and the shadowy figures. Neighbors whispered behind her back, calling her crazy. Even her own family struggled to understand. "Maybe you were dreaming," her sister suggested gently during a phone call. "You've been working so hard lately." But Laura refused to give up. If the authorities wouldn't help her, she would find Emma and Jake herself. She scoured the internet for information about UFO sightings and alien abductions. Most of what she found sounded ridiculous, conspiracy theories and wild speculation. But buried among the nonsense were stories that matched hers almost exactly. Families torn apart, children stolen, lives forever changed. One name kept popping up in these accounts: Jason Cole. He was a former engineer turned conspiracy theorist who claimed to have survived an encounter with extraterrestrials years ago. According to his blog, he'd been abducted by beings similar to the ones Laura described, held captive aboard their ship and subjected to experiments before managing to escape. Skeptical but desperate, Laura tracked him down. Jason lived in a rundown trailer on the outskirts of town, surrounded by piles of junk and half-finished inventions. His hair was unkempt, and his clothes looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks. At first glance, he didn't seem trustworthy. But when Laura told him her story, something shifted in his expression. Gone was the skepticism. In its place was a look of grim recognition. "They're called the Veilith," he said after a long pause. "They travel across galaxies, studying other species. They see humans as interesting, fragile but adaptable." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "If they took your kids, they'll use them for experiments. To learn more about us." Laura felt sick. "Can we stop them, get them back?" Jason hesitated, then nodded slowly. "There might be a way, but it won't be easy. We'd need advanced tech, stuff I don't have, not yet anyway." "What do you mean?" Laura asked, her voice trembling. "There's a bunker," Jason explained. "An old military installation out in the desert. Rumor has it they stored alien artifacts there after a crash decades ago. If we can get our hands on one of those devices, we might be able to track the Veilith, maybe even follow them." Laura didn't hesitate. "Then that's what we'll do." And just like that, her journey began. Leaving behind the safety of her home and the comfort of familiarity, Laura stepped into the unknown. Every step forward brought new challenges, new fears. But through it all, one thing remained constant: her determination to bring Emma and Jake back. Because no matter how far they'd been taken, no matter what dangers lay ahead, Laura Bennett wasn't going to stop until she had her children safe in her arms again. Laura's decision to work with Jason Cole was not an easy one. At first glance, he seemed like the kind of man who lived on the fringes of society, someone who collected conspiracy theories the way others collected stamps. But as they spent more time together, Laura began to see past his rough exterior. Beneath the unkempt hair and cluttered trailer was a sharp mind, someone who had seen things most people couldn't even imagine. And while she still didn't fully trust him, she knew he was her best chance at finding Emma and Jake. Jason explained that the bunker he mentioned was located deep in the desert, far from prying eyes. It had been abandoned for decades, but rumors suggested it contained remnants of alien technology recovered from a crash long ago. If they could retrieve one of those devices, Jason believed they might be able to track the Veilith, the creatures who had taken Laura's children. The plan was risky, but Laura didn't care. She was willing to do whatever it took. The journey to the bunker was grueling. They drove for hours through barren landscapes, the sun beating down mercilessly on the old pickup truck Jason had borrowed from a friend. Laura sat in the passenger seat clutching a map and staring out at the endless expanse of sand and rock. Her mind raced with thoughts of Emma and Jake. Were they scared? Were they hurt? She forced herself to focus on the task ahead, knowing that dwelling on the worst-case scenarios wouldn't help anyone. When they finally arrived, the bunker looked like something out of a movie. A rusted metal door stood partially open, its hinges creaking in the wind. The surrounding area was littered with debris, broken crates, twisted pieces of machinery, and faded warning signs. Jason grabbed a flashlight and motioned for Laura to follow him inside. The air inside the bunker was cool and damp, carrying the faint smell of mildew. Dust covered everything, making it clear no one had been there in years. As they moved deeper into the structure, Jason pointed out strange symbols etched into the walls, markings he claimed were alien in origin. Laura felt a chill run down her spine but kept moving forward. She couldn't afford to let fear slow her down. After what felt like an eternity, they found what they were looking for: a locked room filled with strange objects. Some looked like weapons, others like tools or communication devices. Jason examined each item carefully, muttering under his breath as he worked. Finally, he picked up a small, glowing orb. "This is it," he said, holding it up for Laura to see. "If this thing works the way I think it does, we'll be able to locate the Veilith." But getting the orb wasn't enough. Jason explained that they needed to power it up and calibrate it to track the specific energy signature of the Veilith ship. That required finding a generator somewhere in the bunker. Together, they searched every corner, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Just when Laura started to lose hope, they stumbled upon an old generator tucked away in a forgotten corner. With some tinkering and a lot of patience, Jason managed to get it running. As the orb hummed to life, Laura felt a surge of hope. For the first time since the abduction, she had something tangible, a real lead. But Jason reminded her that this was only the beginning. Tracking the Veilith was one thing, confronting them was another entirely. Over the next few days, Laura and Jason prepared for the next phase of their mission. Jason taught her how to use basic alien technology, explaining the principles behind it in simple terms. He showed her how to operate handheld scanning devices and demonstrated the functions of various gadgets they'd salvaged from the bunker. Laura soaked up every bit of information, determined to learn as much as possible. But knowledge alone wouldn't be enough. Jason insisted that Laura needed combat training if she hoped to survive an encounter with the Veilith. He set up makeshift targets in the desert and taught her how to aim and fire a laser pistol, one of the weapons they'd found in the bunker. At first, Laura struggled. The weapon felt foreign in her hands, and the recoil made her arms ache. But she refused to give up. Every missed shot fueled her determination to improve. "You're doing better than I expected," Jason admitted one evening as they sat around a campfire. "Most people would have quit by now." "I don't have the luxury of quitting," Laura replied, her voice steady despite the exhaustion etched on her face. "Emma and Jake are counting on me." Jason nodded, his expression softening. "You remind me of someone I used to know," he said quietly. "Someone who fought just as hard to protect the people they loved." Laura didn't ask for details. She sensed that Jason carried his own pain, his own losses. Whatever had driven him to dedicate his life to studying aliens, it was personal. In that moment, she realized they weren't so different after all. Both of them were fighting for something bigger than themselves. As the days passed, Laura grew stronger, not just physically but mentally. She learned to push past her fears, to channel her anger and grief into action. Thoughts of Emma and Jake kept her going, giving her the strength to endure the long hours of practice and preparation. She imagined their faces, their laughter, and promised herself she wouldn't rest until they were safe. Finally, the day came when the orb pinpointed the location of the Veilith ship. According to the readings, it was orbiting a distant planet, light years away. Reaching it would require traveling through a wormhole, a phenomenon Jason described as a shortcut through space. While the concept sounded impossible, Laura trusted Jason's expertise. After all, he'd been right about everything else so far. To make the journey, they needed a spacecraft capable of surviving the trip. Jason revealed that he had access to a prototype ship hidden in a secret hangar miles away. It wasn't much to look at, patched together from spare parts and alien tech, but it was their only option. Together, they loaded the orb and other essential supplies onto the ship, preparing for what lay ahead. On the morning of their departure, Laura stood outside the hangar, staring up at the stars. The vastness of space stretched endlessly above her, both beautiful and terrifying. She thought about how small she was compared to the universe, yet how powerful her love for her children made her feel. No matter what dangers awaited them, she was ready. Jason approached her, holding 2 helmets. "You sure about this?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. More than anything, Laura replied without hesitation, let's bring them home. With that, they climbed aboard the ship and initiated the launch sequence. As the engines roared to life, Laura took one last look at Earth, committing its image to memory. Then, with a rush of speed and a flash of light, they entered the wormhole, leaving behind everything familiar. The journey through the wormhole was unlike anything Laura had ever experienced. Colors swirled around them, blending into shapes that defied logic. Time seemed to stretch and compress, making it impossible to tell how long they'd been traveling. When they emerged on the other side, the sight before them took her breath away. They were in orbit around a planet bathed in twilight, its surface dotted with jagged cliffs and glowing cities. Jason confirmed that the Valeth homeworld was directly below them. Laura felt a mix of awe and dread as she gazed at the alien landscape. Somewhere down there were Emma and Jake, waiting for her to find them. We'll need to land discreetly, Jason said, breaking the silence. If the Valeth catch us, we won't stand a chance. Laura nodded, steeling herself for what was to come. The hardest part of their mission was just beginning, but she was ready. No matter what challenges lay ahead, no matter how dangerous the odds, she would stop at nothing to reunite with her children, because Laura Bennett wasn't just a mother anymore. She was a warrior, driven by love and fueled by determination. And nothing, not even an entire alien civilization, would stand in her way. The descent into the Valeth homeworld was a tense and nerve-wracking experience. Laura sat in the co-pilot seat, gripping the armrests tightly as the ship shuddered through the planet's thick atmosphere. Outside the cockpit window, the jagged cliffs and glowing cities grew larger with every passing second. Jason focused intently on the controls, his hands moving quickly to adjust the ship's trajectory. The engines roared as they approached the surface, and for a moment, it felt like the whole vessel might fall apart. We're clear, Jason said finally, letting out a shaky breath as the ship touched down in a secluded valley. He glanced over at Laura, who was pale but determined. From here, we'll need to move on foot. The last thing we want is for them to detect us. Laura nodded, her mind racing. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, but now that they were actually here, the reality of the situation hit her like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just another training exercise or a simulation. It was real. Somewhere out there were Emma and Jake, and she had to find them. They exited the ship cautiously, their footsteps crunching softly against the rocky ground. The air smelled strange, metallic and sharp, unlike anything Laura had ever experienced before. Above them, the sky glowed faintly, casting an eerie light over the landscape. Jason handed her a small device, a cloaking tool he called it, that would help hide them from prying eyes. Keep this activated at all times, he instructed. If anyone sees us, we're done for. As they made their way toward the nearest city, Laura couldn't help but marvel at the alien architecture. The buildings were unlike anything she'd ever seen. Towering structures carved directly into the cliffs, their surfaces shimmering with what looked like liquid metal. Strange symbols glowed faintly along the walls, pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. It was both beautiful and terrifying. Jason led the way, using a handheld scanner to guide them toward areas where human life signs had been detected. According to the orb they'd brought from Earth, Emma and Jake were being held somewhere in the heart of the city. But getting there wouldn't be easy. The streets were patrolled by Valeth guards, tall, insect-like creatures, with elongated limbs and chitinous exoskeletons. Their movements were fluid yet unnerving, and their large, multifaceted eyes seemed to miss nothing. Stay close, Jason whispered, as they ducked behind a pile of rubble near the edge of the city. We'll have to time our moves carefully. Laura nodded, her pulse pounding in her ears. She watched as a group of Valeth passed by, their antennae twitching as they scanned the area. For a moment, one of them paused, its head tilting slightly as if sensing something amiss. Laura held her breath, praying that the cloaking device would hold up. After what felt like an eternity, the creature resumed walking, and the patrol moved on. Once the coast was clear, Jason signaled for them to move forward. They crept through the shadows, sticking to alleys and abandoned corners whenever possible. Every step felt like a gamble, every sound a potential threat. Laura's muscles ached from staying crouched for so long, but she didn't dare complain. She couldn't afford to lose focus, not when she was so close. After what felt like hours, they reached a massive structure at the center of the city. Unlike the other buildings, this one was smooth and featureless, its surface reflecting the dim light of the sky. Jason consulted the orb again, his brow furrowing as he studied the readings. "This is it," he said quietly. "The scans show multiple human life signs inside." Laura's heart leapt at the news, but her excitement was tempered by caution. Getting into the facility would be tricky. The entrance was heavily guarded, with Vaylith soldiers stationed at every corner. Even worse, the door itself appeared to be sealed shut, likely requiring some kind of biometric code to open. "We'll need a distraction," Jason muttered, scanning the area for inspiration. His gaze landed on a nearby maintenance tunnel half hidden, beneath a pile of debris. "That might work. If I can rig it to cause a power surge, it could draw the guards away long enough for you to slip inside." Laura frowned, unsure about splitting up. "Are you sure? What if something goes wrong?" "It's the best shot we've got," Jason replied firmly. "You're faster than me and you know your kids better. Once you're inside, follow the orb's signal. It'll lead you straight to them. Just stay hidden and don't engage unless you absolutely have to." Reluctantly, Laura agreed. While Jason set off to prepare the distraction, she waited nervously in the shadows, clutching the laser pistol Jason had trained her to use. Her mind raced with possibilities, each one more frightening than the last. What if she failed? What if she never saw Emma and Jake again? A loud explosion echoed through the city, jolting her back to reality. Flames erupted from the maintenance tunnel, sending plumes of smoke billowing into the air. As predicted, the guards scrambled toward the commotion, leaving the entrance to the facility momentarily unguarded. Taking a deep breath, Laura sprinted toward the door, her heart hammering in her chest. To her relief, the explosion had triggered some kind of emergency override, causing the door to slide open automatically. Without hesitation, she slipped inside, activating the cloaking device once again. The interior of the building was even stranger than the outside, long corridors lined with glowing panels and strange machinery. The air hummed with energy, making her skin tingle uncomfortably. Following the orb's signal, Laura moved quickly but cautiously, keeping an eye out for any signs of movement. Occasionally, she passed rooms filled with equipment that looked like medical devices, though their purpose was unclear. She forced herself not to dwell on it, focusing instead on finding her children. Finally, she reached a large chamber at the end of the corridor. Inside, she found rows of glass pods, each containing a human child. Her heart sank as she realized just how many had been taken. Some lay motionless, while others shifted restlessly, their faces etched with fear. Then she saw them, Emma and Jake, curled up together in a pod near the far wall. Tears welled up in Laura's eyes as she rushed to their side. "Emma! Jake!" she whispered urgently, tapping on the glass. At first they didn't respond, but then Emma stirred, blinking groggily. When she saw her mother, her eyes widened in shock and disbelief. "Mom?" she murmured weakly, pressing her hand against the glass. "I'm here, sweetheart," Laura said, her voice trembling. "I'm going to get you out." She examined the control panel next to the pod, searching for a way to release them. Fortunately, Jason's lessons paid off. She recognized a few of the symbols from her training and managed to disable the locking mechanism. With a hiss, the glass slid open and Emma and Jake stumbled out, clinging to her tightly. "You came for us," Jake said, sobbing into her shoulder. "Of course I did," Laura replied, hugging them fiercely. "I'll always come for you." But their reunion was short-lived. Alarms began blaring throughout the facility, red lights flashing as the Vaylith realized someone had breached their stronghold. Laura knew they didn't have much time. Grabbing Emma and Jake by the hand, she led them toward the exit, relying on the orb to guide them through the maze-like corridors. Along the way, they encountered several Vaylith, forcing Laura to use the laser pistol for the first time. Each shot sent a jolt of adrenaline coursing through her veins, but she reminded herself why she was doing this. for her children. She refused to let anything stand in her way. When they finally reached the entrance, Jason was waiting for them, looking battered but alive. "Let's go," he shouted, ushering them toward the ship. As they ran, Laura glanced back at the city, her jaw tightening with resolve. The Valeth had underestimated her, thinking humans were weak and insignificant, but they had no idea what a mother's love could do. No matter what challenges lay ahead, Laura Bennett was ready to face them, all for the sake of bringing her family back together. The escape from the Valeth facility was a blur of chaos and fear. Laura held Emma's hand tightly in one grip and Jake's in the other, her legs pumping as fast as they could carry them. Behind them, the alarms continued to wail, echoing through the alien corridors like an angry beast. The Valeth were already mobilizing, their sharp movements and eerie chatter filling the air. Every instinct screamed at Laura to keep moving, to not look back, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being chased. Jason led the way, his scanner guiding them through the labyrinthine halls. "Stick close," he shouted over his shoulder, his voice tense. "We're almost to the exit." Emma stumbled slightly, still weak from whatever the Valeth had done to her, and Laura hoisted her up without breaking stride. "You're okay, sweetheart," she murmured, her voice firm despite the panic bubbling inside her. "Just keep going." Jake clung to Laura's side, his small face pale with terror. He didn't say a word, but his grip on her hand was so tight it hurt. Laura wished she could tell him everything would be fine, but she couldn't lie, not when danger was snapping at their heels. Finally, they burst out into the open air, the cool twilight breeze hitting their faces like a slap. The ship sat where they'd left it, its battered frame looking more fragile than ever under the dim glow of the alien sky. Jason sprinted ahead, punching in the access code to unlock the hatch. "Get inside," he yelled, waving them forward. Laura didn't need to be told twice. She pushed Emma and Jake toward the ship, urging them to climb aboard. Once they were safely inside, she turned to help Jason, who was fending off a group of Valeth guards that had followed them outside. The creatures moved with terrifying speed, their claws glinting in the low light. Jason fired his laser pistol wildly, trying to hold them off while Laura scrambled to close the hatch. "Go! Go!" she shouted, slamming the door shut just as one of the Valeth lunged forward. Its claw scraped against the metal, leaving deep gouges, but the seal held. For now they were safe. Inside the cockpit, Jason took the pilot's seat, his hands flying over the controls. "Strap in," he barked, his voice sharp with urgency. Laura hurried to secure Emma and Jake in their seats, then buckled herself in beside them. The engines roared to life, and the ship lifted off the ground with a jolt, throwing everyone back against their seats. As they ascended, Laura looked out the window, watching the Valeth city shrink below them. The aliens swarmed around the landing site, their glowing eyes fixed on the fleeing ship. A few of them fired strange energy weapons, bolts of light streaking past the hull. One hit struck the rear thruster, causing the ship to shudder violently. "We've got damage," Jason called out, his fingers dancing across the controls as he tried to stabilize the craft. "Hold on." Laura wrapped her arms around Emma and Jake, pulling them close as the ship rocked and spun. Outside, the planet's jagged cliffs blurred into streaks of shadow and light. The Valeth weren't giving up. They pursued the ship, in sleek insect-like fighters, their movements eerily precise. "They're gaining on us," Laura shouted, pointing at the swarm of enemy vessels closing in behind them. Jason gritted his teeth, muttering under his breath as he adjusted the ship's trajectory. "I'm taking us into orbit. If we can reach the wormhole, we might be able to lose them." The ship surged forward, its engines screaming as it climbed higher into the atmosphere. But the Valeth fighters were relentless, firing bursts of energy that rattled the hull. Each impact sent sparks flying inside the cabin, and Laura braced herself for the worst. This was it, the moment when everything could fall apart. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the ship, throwing everyone sideways. One of the Valeth blasts had hit the engine core, sending flames licking through the rear compartment. Smoke filled the cockpit, choking them as alarms blared deafeningly. Jason coughed, his face pale but determined. "We're losing power. I need to reroute the systems manually." "I'll help," Laura said, unbuckling herself and scrambling to the control panel. She didn't know much about spaceship mechanics, but Jason had taught her enough basics during their journey. Together they worked frantically, rerouting power and stabilizing critical systems. Emma and Jake watched silently, their wide eyes reflecting both fear and awe. After what felt like an eternity, Jason managed to regain partial control of the ship. "We're clear," he announced, relief washing over his face. "The wormhole is dead ahead." Laura glanced out the window, her heart leaping at the sight of the swirling vortex waiting for them. It was their only chance to escape, to leave the Valith far behind and return to Earth. But as they approached, another wave of fighters appeared, cutting off their path. "They're blocking us," Laura exclaimed, gripping the edge of her seat. "What do we do now?" Jason hesitated, for a split second, then smirked grimly. Time for a little improvisation. He flipped a switch on the console, activating a hidden feature he'd installed before their departure, a decoy flare launcher. With a press of a button, several bright flares shot out from the ship, creating a dazzling display that momentarily blinded the Valith pilots. Seizing the opportunity, Jason accelerated straight for the wormhole, weaving between the disoriented fighters. The ship lurched as they entered the vortex, colors swirling around them in a kaleidoscope of light and sound. For a moment, Laura thought they might not make it. The strain on the damaged vessel was immense, but then, with a final jolt, they emerged on the other side, back in the familiar darkness of space near Earth. For a long moment, no one spoke. The tension slowly drained away, replaced by a profound sense of relief. They had done it. They had escaped the Valith homeworld and survived against all odds. Jason slumped back in his chair, letting out a shaky laugh. "Well, that was intense." Laura nodded, tears streaming down her face as she hugged Emma and Jake tightly. "You're safe," she whispered, kissing the tops of their heads. "You're safe now." But even as she savored the moment, Laura knew their ordeal wasn't truly over. The Valith wouldn't forget this. They would come looking for revenge. And when they did, she would be ready. Because no matter how many times they came for her family, Laura Bennett would fight back with everything she had. She was a mother, after all. And there was nothing more dangerous than a mother protecting her children. The return to Earth was bittersweet. Laura sat in the cockpit, staring out at the familiar blue-green orb as it grew larger in the viewport. For weeks she had dreamed of this moment, of bringing Emma and Jake home. But now that they were finally here, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The Valith weren't gone, they had only been delayed. She knew it was only a matter of time before they came back, stronger and angrier than ever. Jason landed the ship in the same secret hangar where they had started their journey. The battered vessel groaned as it touched down, its damaged systems struggling to keep functioning. Once the engines powered down, Jason turned to Laura with a weary smile. "We made it," he said softly. "You did good." Laura nodded, but her mind was already racing ahead. What would happen next? How could she protect her children from an enemy that seemed unstoppable? These questions weighed heavily on her, even as she unbuckled herself and helped Emma and Jake out of the ship. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly, its vast emptiness both comforting and unsettling. Laura held her kids close, savoring the warmth of their presence. They were safe for now, but she couldn't let her guard down. Not after everything they had been through. As they drove back toward civilization, Laura noticed how quiet Emma and Jake were. Normally full of energy and curiosity, they now sat silently in the back seat, their faces pale and drawn. It broke her heart to see them like this. Whatever the Valith had done to them, it had left scars deeper than any physical wound. When they finally reached the small town where Laura lived, she felt a pang of guilt. Returning to normal life seemed impossible after what they had experienced. Would anyone believe their story if they told it? Or would they dismiss it as some wild fantasy? For the first few days, Laura tried to act like nothing had changed. She cooked meals, cleaned the house, and sent Emma and Jake back to school. But the illusion of normalcy didn't last long. One night, as she tucked Jake into bed, he looked up at her with wide, frightened eyes. "Mom, are they going to come back?" he asked in a trembling voice. Laura hesitated, unsure how to answer. She wanted to reassure him, to tell him everything would be okay. But lying wasn't an option, not when the truth was so important. I don't know, she admitted gently. But I promise you this, no matter what happens, I'll do everything in my power to keep you safe. Jake nodded, though his expression remained troubled. Emma, too, struggled to adjust. She stopped reading books about space exploration and avoided looking at the stars altogether. Instead, she spent hours drawing pictures of strange creatures and glowing ships, as if trying to make sense of what she had seen. Seeing her children suffer tore Laura apart. She realized that simply rescuing them hadn't been enough. They needed help processing what they had endured. That's when she decided to reach out to someone who might understand, Jason. Over coffee one afternoon, Laura explained her concerns. They're not the same, she said, her voice heavy with worry. Emma won't talk about it, and Jake has nightmares every night. I don't know how to help them. Jason listened quietly, his expression thoughtful. Surviving something? Like that. It changes people, he said finally. Kids especially. They need time to heal. And maybe someone to guide them through it. But who? Laura asked. Who could possibly understand what they've been through? Jason hesitated, then leaned forward. There are others like us, he said slowly. People who've encountered the Veilith, or other species. Some have formed networks, sharing information and support. If we can find the right people, they might be able to help your kids. Laura considered this for a moment. It sounded risky, exposing her family to more strangers, but she didn't have many options. Her children needed answers, and she needed allies if she hoped to prepare for the inevitable return of the Veilith. With Jason's help, Laura began reaching out to these underground networks. Through encrypted messages and secret meetings, she connected with individuals who had faced similar threats. There was Maria, a former soldier who claimed to have fought off an alien invasion in South America. Nathan, a scientist who studied extraterrestrial technology. And Claire, a psychologist specializing in trauma caused by contact with non-human entities. Each person brought something valuable to the table. Maria taught Laura advanced combat techniques, showing her how to use weapons and defend herself in close quarters. Nathan shared knowledge about alien tech, explaining how it worked and how it could be repurposed for human use. And Claire worked closely with Emma and Jake, helping them process their fears and regain a sense of control. At first, the sessions were difficult. Emma refused to open up, while Jake clung to Laura during every meeting. But over time, they began to trust Claire and each other. Slowly, they started to heal. Meanwhile, Laura focused on preparing for the future. With Jason's guidance, she transformed her home into a fortress. Reinforced doors, surveillance cameras, and hidden compartments, filled with supplies, became part of their new reality. She also trained tirelessly, pushing herself harder than ever before. Every punch, every shot fired reminded her why she was doing this, for her children. One evening, as she practiced in the backyard, Jason approached her with a serious expression. "There's something you should know," he said. "I've been monitoring signals from deep space. The Veilith are mobilizing again." Laura froze, her heart sinking. "How long do we have?" "Not long," Jason replied grimly. "Weeks, maybe less." She nodded, steeling herself for what lay ahead. This time they wouldn't be caught off guard. This time they would be ready. That night, Laura gathered Emma and Jake in the living room. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, she looked at them with determination. "Listen carefully," she said. "The people who took you, they're coming back. But we're not going to run or hide. We're going to fight." Emma frowned, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if we can't stop them?" "We will," Laura said firmly. "Because we have something they don't. Something stronger than anything they've ever faced." "What's that?" Jake asked, tilting his head curiously. "Love," Laura answered simply, "and the will to protect the ones we care about." Her words resonated deeply, lighting a spark within all three of them. For the first time since their ordeal began, Laura saw hope flicker in her children's eyes. Together they vowed to stand united against whatever came their way. In the days that followed, the family worked as a team, fortifying their defenses and honing their skills. Emma proved to be quick-witted and resourceful, often surprising Laura with clever ideas. Jake, though still young, showed remarkable bravery, refusing to let fear hold him back. Even Jason remarked on how much they had grown. As the threat of the Valeth loomed closer, Laura found strength she never knew she had. She wasn't just a mother anymore. She was a warrior, a strategist, and a leader. And she knew, without a doubt, that she would stop at nothing to protect her family, because love was the most powerful weapon of all. And armed with that, Laura Bennett was prepared to face anything, even the galaxy's most relentless hunters. The day the Valeth returned, the sky above Laura's town turned an unnatural shade of green. It started with a faint hum, low and steady, that seemed to vibrate through the ground. Then came the lights, bright, pulsing beams that streaked across the heavens like warning signals. Laura stood in her backyard, her fists clenched tightly as she watched the alien ships descend from the clouds. Emma and Jake were inside, hidden in the reinforced basement along with Jason and the supplies they had gathered over the past weeks. Laura had drilled them on what to do if the Valeth broke through her defenses. "Stay together," she had told them repeatedly. "No matter what happens, don't leave each other's side." But now, as the invaders landed just outside the town, Laura felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. She couldn't let them get this far. Not after everything they had been through. This was her home, her family, and she would defend it with every ounce of strength she had. Jason joined her outside, his expression grim but resolute. He carried a modified laser rifle slung over his shoulder, its sleek design enhanced with alien technology scavenged from their earlier mission. "They're here for us," he said quietly. "Not the town. Let's keep it that way." Laura nodded, gripping her own weapon tightly. Together they moved toward the edge of the property, where a makeshift barricade blocked the road leading to their house. The Valeth ships hovered silently, their surfaces shimmering like liquid metal under the strange light. Then, one by one, the creatures emerged, tall, insect-like figures with glowing eyes and sharp, jagged limbs. For a moment, there was silence. The Valeth scanned the area, their movements deliberate and calculated. Laura knew they were searching for weakness, looking for a reason to strike, but she refused to give them one. Raising her rifle, she fired a warning shot that exploded, harmlessly against the lead creature's armored exoskeleton. The reaction was immediate. With an eerie screech, the Valeth surged forward, their claws glinting menacingly in the dim light. Laura and Jason opened fire, their weapons blasting. Bursts of energy that sent several aliens stumbling backward. For a brief moment it seemed like they might hold their ground, but then reinforcements arrived, pouring out of the ships in waves. "They're too many," Jason shouted, reloading his rifle. "We need to fall back." Reluctantly, Laura agreed. Firing off another round, she retreated toward the house, covering Jason as he set up traps along the perimeter. Explosive charges rigged to motion sensors detonated as the Valeth advanced, sending plumes of smoke and debris into the air. The creatures hesitated, giving Laura and Jason precious seconds to regroup. Inside the house, Emma and Jake huddled, together in the basement, listening to the sounds of battle raging above them. Their faces were pale, but they clung to each other, drawing strength from the promise they had made to their mother. "She'll protect us," Emma whispered, though her voice trembled slightly. "She always does." Upstairs, Laura fought, with ferocity born of desperation. Every movement, every shot was fueled by the thought of her children waiting below. She remembered the countless hours she had spent training, the sleepless nights planning and preparing. All of it had led to this moment, the chance to prove that humanity wasn't weak or insignificant. That love could be stronger than fear. As the battle raged on, Laura noticed something odd about the Valeth commander, a towering figure with elongated limbs and a crown-like structure atop its head. It moved differently from the others, more deliberately, as if observing rather than attacking. When it finally spoke, its voice echoed in her mind, cold and emotionless. "You cannot win. Surrender the young ones and we will spare your life." Laura froze, her heart pounding. She recognized the words. It was the same message the Valeth had given her when they first took Emma and Jake. But this time, she wasn't alone. This time she had allies, resources, and most importantly, a reason to fight back. "You want my kids?" she spat, raising her rifle. "Come and take them." With a roar, the commander charged, its claws slicing through the air. Laura rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the strike, and countered with a blast from her weapon. The shot hit its mark, causing the creature to stagger. Seizing the opportunity, she fired again and again, driving it back step by step. Jason joined the fray, firing steadily at the surrounding Valeth to draw their attention away from Laura. "Keep going," he yelled. "Finish it." Summoning every bit of courage she had, Laura launched herself at the commander, tackling it to the ground. They grappled fiercely, her human strength no match for its alien power, but she didn't need brute force. Reaching into her pocket, she pulled out a small device Nathan had given her, a prototype EMP emitter designed to disrupt alien technology. Pressing the button, she held it directly against the creature's chest. A blinding flash of light erupted, followed by a deafening crackle of energy. The commander convulsed violently before collapsing, its body twitching as the EMP fried its internal systems. Around them, the other Valeth faltered, their movements slowing as the pulse disrupted their coordination. Seeing their leader defeated, the remaining aliens began retreating, dragging their wounded comrades back toward their ships. Within moments, the vessels lifted off, disappearing into the sky as quickly as they had come. For a long while, Laura simply lay on the ground, catching her breath and staring up at the stars. Her body ached and her hands trembled from exhaustion, but she felt a deep sense of relief wash over her. They had won, for now. Jason knelt beside her, offering a hand to help her up. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "You really did it." Laura shook her head, smiling faintly. "We did it. All of us." When she entered the basement, Emma and Jake rushed into her arms, tears streaming down their faces. "You're okay," Jake murmured, burying his face in her shoulder. "You're really okay." "I told you I'd protect you," Laura replied softly, holding them close. "And I always will." In the days that followed, life slowly began to return to normal, or as close to normal as possible. The townspeople marveled at the stories of how Laura and her family had fought off an alien invasion, though few truly understood the depth of what they had endured. For Laura, the victory was bittersweet. She knew the Valeth would eventually return stronger and angrier than ever. But she also knew that humanity had proven itself capable of standing up to even the greatest threats. Jason stayed on for a while, helping Laura fortify their defenses and teaching Emma and Jake new skills. Eventually, however, he decided it was time to move on. "There are others out there who need help," he explained. "People who've faced the same dangers you have. I think it's my job to find them." Though she hated to see him go, Laura understood. Before he left, he handed her a small communicator. "If you ever need me, just press this button. I'll come running." After he was gone, Laura focused on rebuilding her family's lives. Emma returned to reading books, though now she favored stories about brave heroes instead of distant planets. Jake started playing outside again, laughing and chasing after his friends, and Laura, she continued to train, to prepare, and to watch the stars, because she knew the universe was vast and full of wonders and dangers. But she also knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them head-on, because she was a mother. And mothers, she realized, were the fiercest warriors in any galaxy. Underneath the starry sky, Laura Bennett stood guard, not just for her children, but for all of humanity. And she vowed never to stop fighting, not until the day she drew her last breath.